This is Tim with Fit to the Core. Today I want to cover mistake number 6 in the top 10 speed training mistakes coaches make with your athletes. Ineffective strength programs. In the newsletter I discussed on mistake number 6 about how we need to make sure our athletes have the appropriate movement patterns before we start loading those patterns. This is very important for speed development, because when we're talking about acceleration, your athletes not only need to get in the right positions for acceleration, but they need to have strength to be able to put great amounts of force into the ground. Okay, whatever they put into the ground, they're going to get back. And when we're talking about speed development, stride length is key. We want them to take less steps in their competition to get from point A to point B, and strength and mobility is a huge part of that. So today what I want to show is I'm going to just show a couple of movement screens from FMS, popularized by Gray Cook, and these are the assessment we do with our athletes. This is just an assessment of movement patterns. We want to make sure that our athletes have the appropriate mobility before we start loading these patterns that are necessary to get into the right positions for acceleration, deceleration, speed, and agility. Okay, so one of the first patterns that we're going to show today, I'm only going to show two. This is a lunge pattern, okay? He's just going to drop in and out of it 3 times for you. I want you to notice how he's getting good mobility out of his back hip and good stability on the front leg. His posture is good. Okay, we're looking at this pattern. Is this a pattern that we want to load? Yes, this is a good pattern to load. He's got the requisite mobility and stability that we need when we get athletes in these lunge positions. Thinking of this lunge position, when we're accelerating, this is where we need to be in acceleration. We've got a leg that's flexing, we've got a leg that's extended with core stability. So now let's show what happens when we get an athlete that doesn't have the appropriate movement pattern to be loaded yet. You're going to see that he loses that stability and mobility. Not only is he losing his mobility back here, but he's losing stability on his front leg, and then we start to get things happening in his lower back. And this is not an efficient pattern. This is a pattern that shouldn't be loaded. But as I mentioned in the newsletter, we get coaches that are more focused on the quality of the lifts, the quantity, how much weight these athletes can lift. You load a pattern like this, not only is it dangerous, it's going to be ineffective for any acceleration. Okay, now I'm going to show a straight leg raise pattern. Okay, this is just another move. This is actually a very fundamental movement pattern. Again, we focus on the pattern. We don't need to focus on what's wrong here. So when we first test our athletes, we want to see, do they have the appropriate stability in their core, stability through the down hip, and mobility on the front leg. He's going to do an active straight leg raise, so we're going to go with his left leg. Okay, we're always testing at the pubis symphysis, but the thing that we're looking for, does this athlete have the appropriate movement pattern? Is this movement pattern clean? As we can see that he does have a good pattern. All right. If coaches aren't assessing, and they don't assess an athlete has this mobility, a lot of the young athletes that I get in here, high school athletes, especially athletes that are in other training programs, I do their hamstring test. I'd say the majority of them are stuck here at first, okay? This is a pattern that needs to be corrected before we load it. And a lot of athletes that come in here that are doing cleans, that are doing lunges, that are doing single leg RDL movement patterns, are loading these patterns. You load that pattern, you're loading the spine, you're not teaching an athlete how to appropriately use their posterior chain, they're not getting stability in the right parts, and they're not getting mobility in the right parts. So again, an ineffective strength program where you load this pattern is going to do nothing for an athlete as far as speed development. Okay, we're just going to look at a rear foot elevated split squat pattern. We could also do this on the ground, but I just want to show this is the pattern that we're going to load. He's going to go down to this pattern. We're going to see that he's got that mobility on the back leg. We've got good posture. He's got good stability on the front leg. This is appropriate if that test on that board for the lunge test was appropriate. In other words, if that was a clean pattern, then we're going to load our athletes. Obviously, it's progressive. If it's a new athlete, we're going to start body weight first. But in either case, we can load this pattern when it's appropriate. Good. Now we're going to show, put the weights down. Now we're going to show a pattern. Now, let's show the pattern when he didn't have that prerequisite mobility over there, okay? When it was a bad pattern. This is what you're going to see athletes doing. You're going to lose that stability on the back, the mobility on the back leg. You're going to see them losing stability on the front leg. And you're also going to start to see everything start to go in their lower back. Again, that wouldn't even be a position that would be appropriate for acceleration and speed training. So this athlete would not be able to get in the right positions. Not only that, the strength that he would gain out of that pattern is useless. It's dysfunctional. It's not something that would transfer over onto the field. It's not even going to transfer over to here when we're working on those acceleration techniques and patterns and drills. The athlete's just not going to get faster. Okay, now we're going to do a single leg RDL pattern. I'm showing single leg movements today because acceleration happens on a single leg. Okay, it doesn't happen on two legs. It's not that we don't do double leg movements. I just want to show what happens when we load the patterns that should be loaded and what happens to the patterns that shouldn't be loaded. And these are functional movement patterns here. So I'm going to show a single leg RDL here. This is we're working the posterior chain back of the leg. These are the muscles required for great acceleration. And he's going to come up. So we can see on the straight leg test, he had good mobility. Okay, he passed that test. This is a pattern that we can load with resistance. He's got good mobility, stability, and he's got good core stability as well. Okay, so it's a good, clean pattern. I'm not going to take the weights down because I don't want to show the inappropriate pattern. But if we have an athlete that doesn't have the appropriate stability or mobility, especially when we saw that straight leg pattern, they're definitely not going to have it when they get on their feet. So usually we're going to see here, as soon as that hamstring loses mobility, we're going to see flexion in the back. We've got no stability on the leg. This is not a pattern that we want to load, and it's not a pattern that's going to be effective for acceleration. In other words, your athletes cannot get faster with this pattern. They will not be able to put the appropriate force on the ground to be faster. Their posture is going to be bad. Everything's going to suffer. So basically, you load this pattern, you hurt an athlete, you decrease their performance.